Hello, boys and girls. So I am rather we are resuming with our discussion as we were doing the GST lecture series. So in the last few days, it's been extremely challenging for me. Although I mean, I have to admit that 2 days I really had taken a break. Prior to that, there were a lot many things which had come up, and for me, it was extremely difficult to continue the lecture series. I understand that gap creates a lot of disharmony. Nonetheless, the as I stated that we would be first covering up the question and answers that we had done till now, and now basis that we are going to proceed further, right? So that is the reason why I wanted to come up with. I wanted to come up with this first discussion regarding how we are going to, rather, how we are going to complete the first part of discussions that we have had thus far. So first हम लोग वो कर लेते हैं. We'll then discuss a bit on how we are going to manage the continuation of the next sessions. The reason being, friends, what happened is that of course that there were some challenges on the work front because of my team members not being, some of them are not keeping well, and a couple of days I myself I was not in a position to take the lectures due to a bad throat. So there was this hindrance. All the more, what I would also ensure that instead of overcommitting, what I have decided that at least I'll try to conduct 3 to 4 sessions, 3 sessions at least in a week, for maybe an achievement, I should say. So now let us discuss the now see, these are very primitive questions, like on the basis of the I have collected these questions from the mixture of the C Institute's module, a few reference books. Okay, all the more directly I cannot put up any notes of any specific book or any of the modules. I have just tried to collate these question and answers from the books which are available. Now there are of course some very basic level questions that are there, which you might find it very basic, but as I had suggested, that what we will be covering first is only the primitive questions on the basic chapters that we have discussed thus far, and then let's try to, so today's session is going to be a short session only for discussing the question and answers for the first 3 chapters. Tomorrow onwards, yes, we are going to resume the discussion. As I said, this week also we'll have 3 lectures till this particular Saturday. We are going to count that, and the timings are changing. Yes, 7:30, 7:45. Sometimes it is becoming a bit of challenge for me to get these lectures accommodated in the same time. So yeah, there is that sort of a time which is changing. So what I'll do is that I'll upload it and keep it on the channel. You can watch it anytime that you have. I'm also trying to use these, like today I'm using the OBS software for doing the live streaming, as Zoom and this thing was having some problem today for me to get it executed. So let's see if it is not really working fine, I'll get back to Zoom. Now the first question that we have here is, explain the meaning of supply as per the provisions of section 7 of the CGST Act. Now friends, there is a typical answer which is written over here. I don't really want you to mug up these answers or mug up these questions. I'll share these question and answer sheets also. As I said that I'll share it to you on the, now to those who had shared the notes already on the stream, on the emails, I'll also request you to kindly send me the mails for these question and answers. I'll give these question and answers to you also. There are, in fact, you must have also already seen the notes that there are already some question and answers which are already as a part of our, part of the study material which I've given. Still, these are some questions that we want to discuss. My purpose of discussing these questions is not just like how you are going to mug up for all this. It is just that we'll try to just understand what the question really expects us to tell that now you're big enough, you are not going to be asked like give reasons for this, give reasons for that. ऐसा भी नहीं होने वाला है हमारे question and answers में. There has to be some logical expression of the subject content which is there. So the question which is there in front of you, explain the meaning of supply as per the provision of section 7 subsection 1 of the CGST Act. Now friends, we have very specifically detailed manner में हमने discuss किया that what supply means. So we said that okay, primarily I have to recall that okay, section 7 was basically divided into 3 parts. Section 7 subsection 1 small a, b, c, then 7.1 capital A, if you remember that what it said specifically, that supply means and includes all form of supply of goods or services such as sale, exchange, transfer, license, rental, lease, barter, disposal, which is made or agreed to be made for a consideration in the course or furtherance of business. These were some primitive contents. Then we saw import of services. Import of services, whether or not in the course of furtherance of business for a consideration, was considered to be a supply. Then transactions, activities and transactions as specified in schedule 3, which may be without any consideration but which are in the course of furtherance of business, those transactions amount to supply. And if any transaction amounts to supply under section 7(1)(a) small v small c, whether it is supply of goods or supply of services, if there were some overlapping condition, we had discussed the schedule 2. So when the question is asked, explain the meaning of the supply as per provision of subsection 7 subsection 1, we are supposed to specifically focus that okay, there were three broad categories of supplies that we had seen, that जो अभी हमने बताया वो सब supplies के categories है. And why this is the meaning that you have to explain, you have to also specifically state that okay, it is an inclusive meaning which is given. There can be additional transactions also which can be envisaged in this category of, in this concept of supply. However, it is not yet stated over here. Till now, whatever is stated, these are the transactions which can be stated. Along with this answer, you can also mention one or two examples or illustrations which will just elaborate your answer. Just keep it limited, not very much broader answers are expected. Okay, so friends, basically even if you see what is the so this is the model answer also suggests, or consists of all those things that we had discussed. Just my additional suggestion would be, try to give one or two examples along with your answer. Right, now we'll move to the next question. Explain meaning of the term recipient of supply of goods or services under CGST Act. Now here it is the challenge, because see, रेसिपिएंट ऑफ सप्लाई का जो डेफिनेशन है ये सेक्शन 2 में दिया हुआ है. डेफिनेशन आपको नोट्स जो दिए उसमें नोट्स में डेफिनेशंस भी सेक्शन 2 में है. रेसिपिएंट ऑफ सप्लाई means the one who is the receiver of that supply, receiver of the supply transaction. So I'm going to say that okay, who is a recipient? So recipient means somebody who is receiving the supply, and who is going to be the one who will be the one who is receiving the supply in the capacity of, maybe now it may be supplier of goods, then he is a receiver of supply of goods. If he is a supplier of services, then he is a receiver of supply of services. So we have the transactions in these particular formats which will be considered as recipient, which will be considered as recipient of supplies. So where the consideration is payable for the supply of goods or service goes the person who is liable. Now they are particularly trying to address that in a situation who will be considered as the recipient of supply. So where the consideration is payable for goods or services, the person who pays such consideration. Where there is no consideration payable for goods or service, the person to whom the goods are delivered or made available, or to the possession of whom or use of the goods is given, is considered as a recipient of supply. Now consideration is payable to standard. Consideration is not payable for supply of goods, then the person to whom the goods are made available, now he is considered to be a recipient. Now we are not really saying that who will be discharging the tax, who will be liable to pay the GST. That is not the purview of this question. Now where no consideration is payable for the supply, the person to whom the services are rendered, and any reference to a person to whom the supply is made shall be construed as a recipient, shall include the agent acting on behalf of such principal. Now friends, here सिर्फ जो recipient of supply का definition भी अगर आप पढ़ते हो, that is also sufficient. So even in the IGST, even in the CGST Act, even in the IGST Act, the term recipient of supply is very relevant to understand in each and every case. So that is why it is something that I wanted to put forward or bring forward in front of you. Now list the activities to be treated as supply under section CGST Act 2017 even if made without consideration. Now this is just like schedule 3, but I hardly feel that in CA examinations you would be asked question that okay, list the activities which are there as a part of schedule 3. But just try to recall what schedule 3 was. Schedule 3 में क्या था? 7 subsection 1 small c में था that transactions and activities which are carried out without any consideration. So उसमें हम लोग ने देखा था कि okay, the transactions between the distinct person which are made without consideration. Then the transactions between related person, उसमें related person में एक specification था about the relative, I mean the employees who are considered as relatives for the purpose of this, कि if a gift is given to the employee in excess of rupees 50,000 during the financial, I mean during a year, then it will be treated as a supply. Then there were specifically the transactions between the transactions of disposal of assets without any, where the input tax credit has been claimed. Then supply of goods by the principal to the agent, agent to the principal, both the ways. Import of services by a person from a related person outside India. Now this is also that we had discussed a form of illustration. यूजुअली यू विल नॉट बी गिवन कि ओके हम लोग को लिस्ट बताओ या फिर ये सब एक्टिविटीज लेके दिखाओ, बट एटलीस्ट 1 2 3 एक्टिविटीज आउट ऑफ दिस यू शुड बी इन अ पोजिशन टू राइट इट. दैट इज व्हाई इट इज रेलेवेंट. Now the next is state whether the following supplies would be treated as supply of goods or supply of services. Now first is renting of immobile property. Now we have seen that transaction where the immobile property is rented, it is not permanently getting transferred. Renting of immobile property is a supply of service. Transfer of right in the goods without the transfer of title in the goods. If you remember we had discussed examples की furniture rent पे दिया है, furniture बेचा नहीं है, furniture आगे जाके बेचेंगे ऐसा भी कुछ commit नहीं किया है, furniture सिर्फ rent पे दिया है, it is considered as a supply of services. Works contract service. Now works contract service में specifically if you remember we had discussed a lot of examples about the works contract service. In GST regime, works contract service is nothing but treated as supply of service if you remember. Then temporary transfer of permitting use of enjoyment. So हमने वो Three Idiot, sorry, I think we refer to some movies का story for Three Idiots or maybe some Kai Poche or some of the movie story that I must have told that okay Chetan Bhagat is transferring the right, or anybody who is giving the IPR for this thing, that will be considered a supply of service. Sale of car, sale of personal car to a dealer. Now personal car is not a part of your business asset. Personal car because it is not considered as supply, because supply में मेरे business क्या asset में supply करता हूँ तो okay. If I am supplying something in the personal capacity, it is not going to be considered as supply as there is no furtherance or course or furtherance of business in that, right? Now explain the services by way of tolerating non-performance of a contract and its chargeability. Now if you remember हमने वो एक discuss किया था example that non-competitive agreements जब होते हैं, that tolerating an act or tolerating non-performance or tolerating an act or situation. So here it says that okay, services which are providing by tolerating non-performance of a contract and its chargeability. So schedule 2 may there is specifically a transaction which is covered which talks about this, that agreeing to the obligation to refrain from an act or to tolerate an act or a situation or bear an act, such act or such forbearance or such abstinence from an act will be considered as a supply. Now here we have to be very clear, that what the purpose of this entry is. So to tax transactions such as non-compete clauses, non-compete agreements, ऐसे जब agreements जब specifically इन intentions के साथ किए जाते हैं that मैं कुछ ना करने के पैसे लेने वाला हूँ किसी से because somebody else is going to get a benefit with that, then such transactions are considered as tolerating non-performance and they will not be liable for, I'm sorry, beg your pardon, they will be liable for GST as a supply of services. So here what they are only expecting, okay, meaning क्या है, it is a supply, yes, because it's a supply of service and schedule 2 में वो covered as a supply of service. We discussed a few examples, so now I'm not going to spend a lot of time. I would request you to refer the examples that we had discussed. Okay. Now there is only one exemption which is associated, all the more we have not yet discussed exemption. As per entry 62 in the exemption notification 12/2017, in case of service provided in central government, state government, union territory or local authority by way of tolerating non-performance of a contract for which consideration is in the form of fines or liquidated damages is exempted. Now exemption does not mean non-applicability of GST. Exemption means for the while the GST is not to be collected. That is what the meaning of exemption is. But right now I'm going to restrict myself from discussing on exemptions to this point only. Okay. Now Mrs. Pragati received legal advice for her personal problems and paid £1,000 as fees to Miss Unnati of UK. Explain whether the above activity of import of service would amount to supply. Now import of service के बारे में हमने क्या पूछा था? Import of services for a consideration whether or not in the course or furtherance of business. Import of services for a consideration whether or not in the course or furtherance of business will be considered as a supply of services. Now Miss Pragati received a legal advice for her personal problem. So it is not in the course of furtherance of business, that is very certain, right? So Pragati received legal advice. So we are going to say, although the import of services for a consideration, it is not in the course of furtherance of business, it would amount to supply. Why? Because schedule 2, I mean अपना scope of supply में section 7(1)(b) में क्या लिखा हुआ है? Import of services for a consideration whether or not in the course of furtherance of business, still it would amount to supply. Now they have given a tweak in the question. If in the above case both of them are real sisters and no consideration is paid. Now if you remember schedule 3 में एक ऐसा ट्रांजैक्शन था कि सप्लाई ऑफ इंपोर्ट ऑफ सर्विसेज फ्रॉम अ रिलेटेड पर्सन विदाउट कंसिडरेशन, राइट? सो यहाँ पे द इंपोर्ट ऑफ सर्विस बाय अ पर्सन टैक्सेबल फ्रॉम अ रिलेटेड पर्सन आउटसाइड इंडिया विदाउट कंसिडरेशन इज रिलेटेड as a supply if it is provided in the course or furtherance of business. Now here, what is the purpose of her advice? Personal problems. तो schedule 3 में भी फर्स्ट केस में हम लोग बोल रहे हैं that legal advice is for a personal problem. So हम लोग बोलेंगे okay, it is not going to be considered as a supply. Will not be treated as a supply. Now if it would have been for a business, then of course schedule 3 का entry मेरा trigger हो जाता है. Then it will be considered as a supply being received from a related person. So तीनों क्वेश्चन मतलब क्वेश्चन में वेरिएशन क्या था? फर्स्ट कैटेगरी वाज अ वैनिला केस कि ओके इफ इट इज रिसीव्ड एज एन इंपोर्ट ऑफ सर्विस फॉर अ कंसिडरेशन whether or not in the course of furtherance of business taxable. If it would have been received from a real sister without consideration but which was not for furtherance of business, तो शेड्यूल 3 में भी नहीं आएगा. बेग पार्डन शेड्यूल 3 का भी वो हिस्सा नहीं, शेड्यूल 1 का भी हिस्सा वो नहीं बनेगा. दैट इज ट्रांजैक्शंस विदाउट कंसिडरेशन स्टिल अमाउंटिंग टू सप्लाई, उसमें कवर नहीं हो. थर्ड केस में इफ इट इज यूज फॉर बिजनेस मींस आई एम रिसीविंग फ्रॉम अ रिलेटेड पर्सन विदाउट कंसिडरेशन बट फॉर द बिजनेस, देन इट विल बी कंसिडर्ड एज अ सप्लाई. सो ये पूरा गेम चल रहा था इन सेक्शन 7 सबसेक्शन 1 स्मॉल b and the entry in schedule 1 where transactions and supplies without consideration, right? Now friends, to conclude on this, the few questions on composite and mixed supply. How the taxability on composite and mixed supply is determined. So we said that okay, composite supply and mixed supply में primarily क्या है, तो आपको section 2 में कंपोजिट सप्लाई का मीनिंग, सेक्शन 2 में मिक्स्ड सप्लाई का मीनिंग ये मालूम होना जरूरी है. कंपोजिट एंड मिक्स्ड सप्लाई का टैक्सेबिलिटी में, कंपोजिट सप्लाई की टैक्सेबिलिटी में क्या बोला है? ओके, इट विल अमाउंट टू सप्लाई ऑफ दैट सप्लाई व्हिच इज अ प्रिंसिपल सप्लाई. एंड मिक्स सप्लाई में बोला है दैट इट विल बी कंसिडर्ड अ सप्लाई ऑफ दैट सप्लाई व्हिच इज हैविंग द हाईएस्ट रेट ऑफ जीएसटी, राइट? सो कंपोजिट सप्लाई में प्रिंसिपल सप्लाई को जो भी रेट ऑफ टैक्स अप्लाई होता है वही पूरे वैल्यू के ऊपर होगा. मिक्स्ड सप्लाई में जो भी हाईएस्ट रेट पे चलेगा वो उसके हिसाब से टैक्स होगा इन केस ऑफ मिक्स्ड सप्लाई, राइट? नाउ देन Z is a supplier registered in Telangana, procures goods from China and directly supplies to a customer in USA. Z, a supplier in Hyderabad, Telangana, procures goods from China and directly supplies to USA. If you remember schedule 3 में there were a couple of entries which I spoke about which is called as out and out supply. कि where I am sitting in India, I import goods from China, I sell it to USA without bringing those goods into India. Such transactions are treated as out to and out supply. That means they are schedule 3 transactions, neither considered as supply of goods nor considered as supply of services, not liable for GST. So the activity is under the purview of schedule 3. The transaction is neither supply of goods nor supply of services. Now examine whether the following activities would amount to supply under section 7. Damodar Charitable Trust agrees, the trust who gets the eye treatment of needy people done free of cost, donates clothes and toys to the children living in slum. Will it amount to disposal of business assets? The answer is no. So इसमें कोई भी GST नहीं आना है. Sulekha manufacturers having a factory in Delhi and depot in Mumbai. Both the establishments are registered in respective states. Now they are saying Sulekha manufacturers have a factory in Delhi and a depot in Mumbai. Both the establishments are registered in respective state. Now, because they are distinct persons in two different states, their transaction between manufacturing unit to the depot will be considered as a supply for the purpose of GST because it is coming under Schedule 1. So it will be liable for GST. रमन इज एन इलेक्ट्रॉनिक नाउ सिर्फ यहाँ पे एक ही है कि इसमें थोड़ा वैल्यूएशन रूल्स के बारे में देयर आर स्लाइट वेरिएशंस when we'll discuss the when we'll discuss the chapter of valuation, we will discuss that how to deal with it. Raman is an electronic commerce operator in Chennai. His brother, who is settled in London, is a well-known lawyer. Raman has taken legal advice from him free of cost with regard to his family dispute. Is it in furtherance of business? No. He has taken a legal advice from a related person, but regarding family dispute. So हम लोग बोलेंगे boss, this is not taxable, right? Would your answer be different if Raman has taken the advice in respect of business unit? Then yes, schedule 1 का entry, beg your pardon, मैंने ऊपर भी schedule 3 बोला गलती से. Schedule 1 का transaction का entry trigger हो गया because it is for furtherance of business. So it makes a difference obviously in this particular case, right? Now, एक आगे का जो question है, it is more inclined on the aspect of mixed and composite supply. Let's try to see that. A professional training institute gets its training material printed from a printing press. The content of the material is provided by the training institute, who owns the usage right of the same, while physical inputs including paper used for printing the below belong to the printer. Ascertain whether supply of training material by the printing press constitutes supply of goods or services. Supply of goods or supply of services. Now what they are saying, प्रोफेशनल ट्रेनिंग इंस्टीट्यूट गेट्स इट्स ट्रेनिंग मटेरियल प्रिंटेड फ्रॉम अ प्रेस. प्रेस वाले का काम क्या है इस केस में कि ठीक है आप कंटेंट दे दो, सॉफ्ट मीडिया में आप कंटेंट दोगे, मैं आपको पेपर सेटिंग करके बताऊंगा, पेपर साइजिंग बताऊंगा, मैं सिर्फ प्रिंट करके आपको वापस देने वाला हूं. डू आई रिजर्व एनी राइट ऑन दैट कंटेंट? नो, आई डोंट रिजर्व एनी राइट ऑन दैट कंटेंट. मेरा एक्टिविटी सिर्फ प्रिंटिंग का है. मैं उनको प्रिंटिंग का जॉब वर्क चार्जेस लगाऊंगा, मैं उनको प्रिंटिंग का एज अ सप्लाई ऑफ सर्विस चार्जेस लगाऊंगा. I am going to charge them for the printing activity, services, labor, material, everything, and I'll call it as a supply of printing services or printing jobs. But for me, it is not going to be considered in any way as a supply. I mean, ये जो content उन्होंने मुझे दिया वो मेरा content है ही नहीं, मुझे चाहिए भी नहीं, मैं उसके ऊपर का कोई right नहीं देता. So what they say, there is a circular specifically in regards to this. The supply of books printed with content supplied by recipient of goods is a composite supply, and question whether such supply constitute or such supply would be determined on the basis of the principal supply. Now here, supply of printing is a principal supply. I just told you, so I'm not repeating the answer. Determine whether the following supply would be treated as supply of goods or supply of service as per schedule 2. Title in the goods under an agreement which stipulates that the same thing shall pass in the future. So if you remember, मैंने आपको hire purchase के बारे में बताया था. It is considered as supply of goods. Transfer of right in the goods without using the transfer of title in the goods, we already discussed this. It's a supply of service. Transfer of title in the goods immediately, supply of goods. Renting of immobile property, supply of services. The job work performed by a job worker, it is supply of services. Job work मतलब मैं दूसरे से आए हुए goods के ऊपर काम करके देता हूँ, that is called as job work. In which of the following the supplies have been covered also determine which category. Supply of goods, supply of services, neither supply of goods nor supply of services. So in this case, what I need to only check is what are supply of goods, what are supply of services, and what are neither supply of goods nor supply of services. So neither supply of goods nor supply of services में हम लोग को ये तीन कैटेगरी में ट्रांजैक्शंस को आइडेंटिफाई करना है. Goods forming part of business asset are transferred by business so long as no longer to be form a part of those assets without any consideration. ये शेड्यूल 1 में डिस्पोजल ऑफ एसेट्स के बारे में बात आ रही है. शेड्यूल 1 के हिसाब से इट्स अ सप्लाई, इट इज अ ट्रांजैक्शन लायबल फॉर जीएसटी एंड इट इज अ सप्लाई ऑफ गुड्स. सर्विसेज बाय एन एम्प्लॉई टू एन एम्प्लॉयर, एम्प्लॉय टू एम्प्लॉयर शेड्यूल 3 में आता है. नाइदर सप्लाई ऑफ गुड्स नॉर सप्लाई ऑफ सर्विसेज, नॉट लायबल फॉर जीएसटी. Services by court or arbitral tribunal, we again discussed, it's a part of schedule 3. Temporary transfer of intellectual property right, supply of services, schedule 2 में दिया है. Services of funeral, burial, crematorium, it is a transaction as per schedule 3, neither supply of goods nor supply of services. Lease rentals collected, supply of services, sale of land not liable for GST because land is an immobile property. In Schedule 2 as an exception we saw that immobile properties के ऊपर कोई भी GST नहीं लगता है, right? So friends, we have just gone through a few questions which I thought which were relevant for you. We are going to continuing, I mean now we are going to continuing our discussion on supply, that is section 9, and then we'll go to the composition levy. So till that time I would again, express my regret to the extent that okay, there was a gap in between. But see, there are, I mean, the only reason being that because of only the practical challenges that I was having at my end, I was not able to conduct the lectures. But as I said, that instead of overcommitting, but I'll ensure that November attempt students are not getting disturbed. I'll try to finish up your portion by end of September, or rather I would say by 10th of October. I would also state that 1st to 9th September we will not be having lectures, or 1st to 10th September, because I'm traveling somewhere. I had a pre-travel plan, but that's why in the next 15 days I'll try to cover as many say lectures as possible, and then we'll continue in the September month. So friends, thank you so much for joining in. Have a good day, good night ahead, good day ahead whenever you see this lecture. So take care. Jai Hind, Jai Maharashtra till then, and I'll see you on the other side with the chapter of concept of supply, beg your pardon, in the chargeability section and the composition levy. So till then, thank you so much. Bye.